Hello, everyone. Just a quick introduction for those of you that don't know me. I have met some of you and recognise some of your faces. My name's Lauren, and I'm the one of the enterprise officers in the Essex Startups team. I have been on the team for a couple of years, but been away for the last year on maternity leave. So that's probably why you might think you don't know who I am, but I have been here for a little while, and I'm now back with the team again. So I just wanted to speak to you, even though I haven't been involved in these sessions over the last 4 weeks, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update. You probably had it right at the beginning from Andy about the next steps after you've attended all these sessions as to what will happen for you pitching. So I take it from seeing all of you here that you've all been here for this is your 4th session. So have you all attended all sessions so far? Yeah, got a few nods there. Great. Okay. So what we're looking at doing for the next steps will be is that you will have the pitching final, which we've got the date of the 11th of March. So as long as all of you have attended the 4 sessions, you will get an invite to this. So you will be invited with a time slot. So I don't know them yet, but you will get that through as an email just to say, this is your time slot. This is when we want you to come. You will have to pitch in front of a panel. So the panel we're looking at will be Paul, it will be myself, and it will be Andy and Alexa, who I think you've probably all met one of them or both of them before. So what we'd like you to do, just to remind you, is to have a workable version of your app business idea, so turning your business into an app, or a wireframe example. So as Paul said, he's got Jake coming in to discuss with you sort of the different software things that you can use. I think previously InVision was mentioned as one of them, but there might be different ones that you can use. So depending on what's right for your business and what suits how you can explain it best, there isn't any set sort of criteria in that sense that you have to use the software, or you can use sort of a wireframe approach to it. The presentation of the business idea and sort of the app idea is 5 minutes. So your pitch 5 minutes long. Other than that, there isn't a huge amount of criteria on it. Obviously, we want you to explain it all to us fully. Sort of, you know, the background of it, why you've got this idea, the research that's maybe been involved. So market research, what have you done so far, competitors, that sort of thing. Your revenue, so how might you make money from this, and then sort of obviously explaining the app, how it would work, the usability of it, that sort of thing. That's kind of what we want to see from this. So obviously I know it's quite a lot to cram into 5 minutes, but just try and explain as best as you can in those 5 minutes so that we've got a real understanding.
Okay.
Oh, was that a question somewhere?
Don't worry.
Yeah.
We just have more people joining. If I might just add on to what Lauren said. So obviously you had to attend all of the previous sessions. You should receive an invite to pitch. If you did so, if you do not receive an invite and you think you should have received an invite, not because you feel like you should have received it, but because you did attend the sessions and maybe we missed stuff on your attendance, do email us if you don't receive it. We'll probably, when do you think we'll send the invitations out, Lauren, by? Do we have a date on that?
Oh, I don't actually have an exact date, but I would imagine, what do we say, Wednesday? It will be probably within either the end of this week or probably early next week. So
awesome, yeah. So if you don't receive an invitation by early next week and you feel like you should receive it, then email us and we can look into that again, because you might be logging in from different accounts. That doesn't always register. So that's for that. That's if you don't get an invitation. Apart from that, for the sake of this session, please switch your cameras on. I know half of you are probably sitting there, in your bathrobes or whatever, at the comfort of your own houses. Again, it helps us to deliver better sessions when we can interact with you, when we can see you. I mean, half of you got the idea already and half of you are doing the amazing job already. But yeah, again, I encourage you to switch your cameras on. And over to, again, Lauren or Paul, please.
Well, I'll pick. Lauren, anything else you want to add?
Oh, sorry, there was literally just one last little bit just to remind you guys again, and then Paul can take over, was what you actually will get out of your pitching session. So obviously, I'm not sure what Andy has said in terms of how many sort of amount of funding that we can give out to each person. But we have been told that we've got through Paul, you will be able to receive £4,500 of business support through Paul's company, so Pocket App, and also you will receive £3,000 of microfinance grants. That's to work towards the business. I will have to just clarify on that, how if it is just a one winner on that. I'm not sure, Christian. Did you know that already, or Paul, or if it is going to be shared? I don't know.
There's last time I talked to Andy, there's definitely a first prize, and I think there was a potential opportunity for a second prize, subject to the quality of entries. So I think there was a bit of a
great.
So it may be there may be a runners-up prize as well, but I think you pitch to win, I'd suggest.
Yes, that's it. That's the idea. So that's kind of everything from me. Does anyone have any questions? I'll try and answer them for you on that. No? All okay? Great. If you do think of anything, I will be in the session until about 3:30 today. So you can always pop something in the chat if you've got a question. But I'll hand you over to Paul now. Thank you.
Great. Now let me just see if I can get my screen share sorted here. Hang on a second. See if that's going to work. Right. Can you are you seeing the presenter view or the correct view?
We are seeing the presenter view, Paul.
Okay, let me just stop that for a second by sharing it again. How's about that? Is that now the main slide?
Perfect.
Great. I can see Christian's hand going up there to indicate that we've got it right for a change. Right. Having whizzed through those slides. Right. So what I'm going to try and cover now, between now and when Jake turns up, is some of this. We may not get through all of it. If not, we can touch on it at the end. And if worst case, you'll get the slides. So we're going to look at basically how do you turn your idea into a business, a little bit around funding, some tools that you can use to support it, and a little bit on tax breaks that are available for businesses, and some other thoughts. So first of all, it's a bit of a gamble. I'm sure there's lots of supportive words that people are saying around starting a business, but actually it is a gamble. The rewards are really high. The rewards personally in terms of being in charge of your own destiny, but also the potential financial rewards of building a product that then launches and is sold to somebody else. An example of how lucrative that can be, when Instagram started, it was 365 days later they sold to Facebook. So less than just a year of business, and they sold for £365 million. So they earn £1 million per day in terms of value for their company. However, the reality of that is that 50% of all startups fail in their first year. By the end of year 2, 80% have failed. So it is a bit of a roll of the dice, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't roll the dice. It just means you've got to know that that's the case and take your risks accordingly. So how do I make my idea a business? Well, there's some sort of administrative elements that you need to do here. First of all, you need to sort of form a business, and whether that's a company in its own right, which you would register through Companies House. And these days you can register a company online for, a couple of pounds, £100 maximum. But you could be doing it as a self-employed. The reason you would want to do that rather than just get on with it is it means that when you do a tax return, all the costs that are associated with setting up your business, you can get tax relief on. And that's really important when you're starting up. So it's, you're going to make a loss during your first period. So you might as well have the tax man at least take that into account. The other thing you'll be needing to do is set up a business bank account. So alongside your idea, you need to be able to segment your business expenses from other expenses. So There's lots of new startups that are new startup banks that are really suited to working with. I've just actually transferred one of my businesses over to Starling Bank. Really great interface, really easy to use. And by doing that, you're keeping all your finances separate, which is really important when it comes to the tax man and or just tracking your business. You need to, as I say, keep account of everything right from the get-go. Even if you're not really fully starting the business, things that you're spending your money on now will count towards those expenses that you can put into the business later. So if you're, buying some software, whether you're even, stationary items for you to be able to draw out your idea, are all legitimate business expenses, and you can start capturing those right from the start and then put those through your business in due course. The primary thing you need to do is get that business plan sorted. We touched on it in one of the earlier weeks, but you need to have that plan done so that you can actually sell your idea to others who will then hopefully invest in you, but also so that you know how you're performing. Now, there's quite a lot of template content out there. I'm sure that the Enterprise Hub would be able to help you with this aspect, but it's really vital that you get get your idea down and documented and know what your costs are going to be, know what your opportunities are going to be. But you can keep your costs as low as possible during that initial period until you start to make sales. I mean, we've talked about before, working with co-founders potentially from the university who can offer skills that will contribute to the core costs of your business. So if you're not a designer, make sure you partner with a designer. Make sure you have make sure you found the right person. Is there someone who can help you with the legals? Maybe it's a friend who happens to be studying law. That's the reality. In truth, most startups get most of their legal documents by going to templates that are available from people like the Enterprise Centre, or just by Googling it and finding we needed an NDA document when Pocket App first started, a non-disclosure agreement. So we went and found some online, and then we adapted those. I can see there's some questions around the business templates in the chat, and I'm sure Lauren and team will be able to email those over to you. There we go. Sorry, let me just move wrong slide. Just bear with me. So how do you get started? Well, there's lots of different ways of getting a little bit of seed funding to get your business off the ground. A great one, for example, is to win a competition at a local university where they give you a little bit of seed funding and some support. But there are lots of other ways of getting some funding. The Prince's Trust is an organisation which is about helping young businesses get started. They offer some funding and also some preferential loans. There's quite a lot on UK Gov site. So if you go to gov.uk, there's a whole piece around startup loans, which are unsecured loans for startups that the government provides. And there's also some really great resources at a site called Granttree, which is another example of lots of different grants that are available for startups, for people who are funding different ideas in different spaces, and will point you in the right direction. They themselves, I don't think, actually do the grants. It's just they're directing you to people who do. There's an organisation called Innovate UK. They have significant funding available to support ideas in that early startup stage where you're just trying to prove whether something is possible. There are also regional grants. Now, I have to say, I don't know what the support network is like in Essex, but elsewhere in the country, particularly in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, there are a whole series of government-funded initiatives to help you get going in business. So if you look, I'm trying to think the name of the organisations. Anyway, if you look at the regional grants for business startups, if you Google that, for example, in Northern Ireland, they will help pay for your costs of salaries for first few employees. to get you going. They'll cover a significant percentage of the cost. Others give preferential rates on hiring premises, all sorts of different support. And you need to look at what's the best package for you, depending on what your needs are. It might be that you're sort of location agnostic, in which case you should choose wherever's going to suit best once you get going a bit. Or alternatively, you may be tied to a location, and it's therefore a question of looking at what's specifically available in that location. The first stage of raising money is really to reach out to friends and family. That's how we started our business here at Pocket App. A bit of self-funding from the founders, but also then we reached out and found people who were willing to invest a bit in the business to get us going. Clearly, if you're asking people to invest in the business, you're going to be giving up some shares in your business, some equity. You need to make some careful thoughts around about how much you will give up. I think you've all watched Dragon's Den, I've no doubt, knowing this audience. And they're giving away a percentage of their business for some cash. And in Dragon's Den, you'll see they're often giving away quite a large percentage. Well, you may want to decide whether you really want to, what are you going to get out of that? Is that money offering you enough value? That first round, that friends and family round, is eligible for a tax relief, which is called SEIS, which means that it helps anybody who is a taxpayer to invest in startups. Again, I suspect this is something the enterprise team can help you with, but at that stage, that investment, getting that SEIS approval means that you'll be far more investable as a company. And that will give tax breaks to the people who invest in you. They will pay less tax, which is why they're willing to do it, which effectively means that for every pound they're putting in, they're only really putting in half that amount. But equally, it protects them if you go bust, which means that they can get most of their investment back. So it's really very low risk for them, and means that it's a very attractive environment within the UK for startups. So there's a lot being done to help fund startups.
Paul, I've got a question actually around that. How much of a tax relief does that grant anyone who invests in your company? Because I've heard that, for example, for venture capital companies, they get as much as 80% tax relief. And that essentially means that they have, again, very little risk in what they're investing in because the money gets essentially returned back to them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's sort of, I mean, there's a little asterisk at the end of this sentence, which is please take your own tax advice and legal advice. But broadly, SEIS, which is the special version, which goes up to the first £150,000 invested in a company, that tax relief effectively protects them, I think, up to about 90% of the cost if the company was to go bust, which means it's very attractive. If they put some money in now and they have a tax bill, they would effectively get half their money back immediately. So for every pound they're putting in, it's only costing them 50 pence. EIS, which is between 150,000 and 5 million, that is a slightly different funding and tax arrangement, and they get slightly less back immediately, and there's also slightly less longer term protection, but both are really attractive to taxpayers. This venture capital money is slightly different, and I'm not one I'm as knowledgeable around, to be honest. But the second round of investment, typically after friends and family, is what you may have heard of as people who are called business angels, and these are people who invest in startups. They don't tend to invest huge sums of money, so they might be investing £40,000. They're not going to invest £4 or £5 million, but they are taking advantage of these tax breaks, and they are looking because they know that it de-risks it for them to invest. So that's the type of investor, and once you get through that family and friends round and your business starts to grow, the next round is generally trying to get some of that money from an angel or multiple angel investors. They often specialize in one particular area. So they might be really into health, or they might be really into transport related projects. Some are interested in certain types of entrepreneurs. So they back exclusively female startups, or they would only back BAME-led startups. So there's you need to look again for the right angel network. So that's typically what you do is you go and pitch to a room similar to a Dragon's Den, but then they are not nearly as aggressive. But what they will do is they will then decide whether they're interested in backing you, and then you pitch like you're going to do at this competition, and then they might say, well, yeah, let's have a proper conversation about putting some money into your business. After that, there are a number of other rounds of types of investment. One of them is crowdfunding, so that's a more recent area, which is where you go to a site like Crowdcube or Seedrs, and you're able to crowdfund your investment. This is particularly good for those products that are more consumer focused. The sites tend to not suit so well B2B type products because the people who are investing tend not to understand that market so much. But if you've got a product that you're trying to get people to invest in, that can actually be a really good way of raising money. And also then you're talking to the market for VCs, venture capitalists. They tend to be significantly higher investment levels. They tend to not be interested in investing less than sort of several $100,000, which sounds great, but actually it means unless your business is valued, £1 million plus, they're going to want too much of your business for you to want to have that level of investment. And finally, if it all goes super well, you can do an IPO and launch on the stock market, and that's what the likes of Facebook, Uber, Deliveroo, etc. have all done, and that's when you get into the valuations of hundreds of thousands of pounds, millions of pounds, and ultimately you become what everyone wants to become is a unicorn, and that's a valuation of over £1 billion. And there aren't many unicorns out there. The most recent one in the UK that came through actually a crowdfunding route is Revolut. And they recently became a unicorn. So that's the ultimate goal. Christian, if you could just let me know if Jake joins at any point. So the next thing you do as part of this investment process is you need to pitch your idea. And I think this is what you're going to be doing as part of the competition. But what you need to do during that process is get your idea across really quickly. And I think the 5-minute pitch in this competition is really good because it really focuses your mind on getting your idea across quickly. You need the judges to understand what your idea is, understand what the business behind it is, and bring it to life a bit. And I think that's where, in terms of the having either a wireframe and or an interactive prototype will hopefully make that story easier to tell, because as they say, a picture is 1,000 words. So showing something will hopefully fill in a lot of more detail very quickly than you could ever explain in 5 minutes.
Paul,
yep.
Was it Jake that we were waiting for?
Yeah.
Yep, so Jake is now with us.
Okay, well, I'll just finish off on this and then we'll go over to Jake. Actually, there's a nice segue there. So what you need to do during that pitch, and any pitch, is tell the judges what your idea is, then tell them in more detail, and then wrap up by telling them what you've told them. Classic presenting. You're going to have 5 minutes. So you're going to have to time it. So practice it. Don't try and cram in too much. Get your core elements across. And as I say, bring that story to life with some interactive demonstration, whether that be a wireframe walkthrough, some visualizations. That's what will bring your idea to life. Now, I'm joined by Jake Davis. I'll just let me stop my screen share so he can take over in a second. We're joined by Jake Davis. He's our design director. He will introduce himself a bit more in a moment, and he's going to take you through a bit of a recap on some of the stuff we did week 1, 2 around pre-design and design. Basically everything I said is actually what Jake's taught me over the years. So if there's any conflict, he's right and I was wrong. So over to Jake.
Hi there, guys. One sec. Let me just get set up on the slide on the sharing screen. Should I be able to share screen? Yeah. Cool. Paul, is that coming through for you?
Yep, that's coming through. Yeah.
I do this then. Can you see it in full screen? Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, lovely. I've got a thumbs up and everything. Cool. So yeah, like Paul said, I'm Jake Davis. So I'm the design director at Pocket App. And basically my job title just means that I talk design for mobile interfaces for a living. So I help clients work through their proposed projects. So they come to us and say, we want to build an app that does X. You know, it's a social media for people that do woodworking, or it's a new disruptive bank app, whatever it may be. Clients come to us. We work through the process that I believe Paul's already gone through in some level before, and we take them through the various stages of design to then end up with a fully designed interactive prototype that I'll go through in a bit, and then that obviously moves on to development. What I'm going to talk through today is a lot around the methodology of design for building an interface and creating a sort of mobile app experience. So basically what I'm going to do is we've got about 15 or so slides I'm going to talk to you for the first little bit, just around, you know, how you go about breaking down the idea of what the app is that you guys, you know, are, you know, looking to pitch and put together some designs for, how you can think about what do the users get out of it, what's it for the business, what does that mean in terms of buttons, interface, who's it for, target audience, what's the functionality, is there anyone out there that's already doing it, all of these considerations from a sort of methodology design point of view. Then I'm going to walk through some of the bits of delivery that we would normally do as part of a project, which Paul's mentioned actually briefly while I caught that last few minutes there, like the wireframe, like the interactive prototype, like the design and the high fidelity design of the images and what it's going to look like. And then I've got a couple of tools to quickly demo to you guys in terms of what you could use to make your own app interfaces. I'm not going to lie, I don't use one of these tools day to day, so I've made it up. I had to quickly remind myself of how to use the one that I'm going to show you today, so you have to bear with me. A lot of the shortcuts are the same as my program, but when we get to it, I'll do the best I can. And at the end, you guys feel free to, you know, we'll probably open up for a few questions and stuff on what I've been saying. Does that sound about right, Paul?
Yes, he says, jumping off mute.
Yeah, no worries. Cool. So first of all, how would you... That's a background noise.
I think it's Christian's.
Oh, okay, cool.
It's,
So first,
do you mind muting yourself just quickly? Ah,
Yeah.
awesome.
we all good?
Please continue, Jake.
Yeah, cool. Cheers. So the first step is, how do you design an app, right? So what I believe... Oh, I'm still getting background off someone. I think it might be Krishna. I don't know if you're able to mute, Krishna. Cheers, thanks. So how do you design an app? So the first thing that we get day to day, and what you guys will probably have as a business concept or a proposed app, is an idea, right? It's, you know, we're going to make money by setting up a new disruptor bank. We're going to create an app that sells photographs on magnets, whatever it may be, weird and wonderful ideas that potentially is a new thing that hasn't been done before, or it's a new way of looking at it. What I'm going to say at the beginning is try and not go into it with a complete idea of exactly what the app should look like, do, be, function like, everything. Those predisposed ideas, while they may be great and some of them might end up being your USPs, a lot of it needs to be validated and worked through first in terms of research, because otherwise you're going in making an app that's actually for you rather than for any actual end user. You're making an app for, you know, Jake. You know, I could find a great app for myself that helped me find people to play the PlayStation with later, and it gave me cooking recipes and it did all these other things, but it'd be so nuanced to me that no other human being in the world, maybe apart from Paul, would actually download and use the application. So you've got to think about what the app needs to do for others. And the first thing to do for that is, what's the original objective? You know, don't get distracted. It's actually one of the biggest things we repeat over and over again here at Pocket App is you went into this with one core objective. You know, let's say it's someone in a retail environment that wants to sell more sales items. That's the purpose of the app. They want to output more of their sales items. What it shouldn't have at that point is all of their normal items coming in, all of the calculators and offers and everything else where they just start throwing everything at it. Because the problem with that is it gets so diluted around what it was that it loses its way. You know, a lot of people will be familiar with, you know, like the Instagram updates that have happened more recently, and, you know, more famously, the sort of interface overhaul that Snapchat went through at one point, where it started bringing other things in that people just didn't want as part of their core experience. Like, you know, Instagram having like a shopping icon down the bottom. That's not what people are going on Instagram for, right? They're going on Instagram to look at pictures of glorified plates and fashion and everything else. They don't want to be sold to on the tab bar. So try and stick to your original objective and don't get distracted by it. What I sort of always say, and what we try to do as much as possible, is put the objective down. Whenever you're going to do a new bit of work for that, whether it's a design, whether it's a bit of research, have the objective on the page, or at least somewhere you can see it the whole time, so you can keep going back to it over and over again. Now, there's two breakdowns of what the app needs to really be able to do. There's two payers really, and two stakeholders. There's the end users and there's the business. So you guys are the business in this situation, and your end users are all of the consumers, customers, any users of your application. The first one, the users, why are they there? So you're going to make a social media, brand new social media, or you're going to make I don't know, a retro vintage clothing app, a bit like Depop or something like that. What are they there for? You know, what do they want? What is the purpose for them? You've got an objective, but does that mean anything to the actual end user? First and foremost, they are your users, right? So they're the only reason that your app's going to be successful. Without them, there's really no app at all. You know, an app that's only got 2 people kicking around on it isn't going to be successful by any means, regardless of how wonderful the interface and experience is. So branching off that original objective, turn that into a series of stories. So I want to be able to sell retro vintage clothes. I'm just going to use Depop because I saw an advert before I come on here. So Depop, you need to be able to list an item. You need to be able to browse items. You need to be able to search for items. You need to be able to purchase an item, do delivery for items. There's a series of things that the user is going to want to be able to do for that objective to work. So they become byproducts of your original objective. Now that's great. You've got a reason for why the app's going to be used. The flip side that sometimes can get lost in that or completely ignored is, what does the business get out of it? You know, famously, apps that went out there originally that didn't actually have a monetization model, like Instagram, Facebook, all these social media apps that were there for a community experience and user-generated content, but they didn't actually generate any money, and they had to work that out later with advertisement and product placement and everything like that. If you can go into it knowing what your business model is. So for everything the user's doing, let's say use a Depop example again, they take commissions and cuts off of it, and they're also using advertisement to make money. So that's what the business gets out of it. So the user's happy. Make sure the business has also got a objective that I again caught part of what Paul was talking about on previous sessions. The business model only works if there's a business model inside of the application. Now that might be monetized outside of it in some way, and that's fine. That's your business model. But the thing the business is maybe getting out of that is data. You know, it might be that no money goes through your app at all, but you're finding out the buying patterns of millennials in supermarkets. That's worth something as data. That's still what the business is getting out of it. So they need to sit along the user objectives. And that's where it's important to keep it balanced. You need both. You need to be able to say, the user can do this, the business gets this. The user can do this, the business can get this. So while you were coming up with those user stories at the beginning, they're great, but you also need a similar set of those for the business. So user does this, business gets this. User does this, business gets this. If it's not helping one or other of those parties, there's probably no reason for it to be in the app at all. Because if it's not helping you as a business, it's not helping the user. You've just put it in there for the sake of it. And also, if something causes a contradictory issue, like the user wants to be able to sell things for free, I'm sure they do, because that's great for them, but that doesn't help the business at all. So it's keeping a balance between them. Now, one of the things that I know Paul has spoken about before is target audience. You know, who are these users? I keep using the term users. That's not just, generic every person in the universe. We get a lot of people that come to us and say, we want to make an app. We ask who it's for, and they say ages 13 to 75, male and female, low income, high income, with a house, in a flat, and want to just do it for every single person out there. That's not realistic, right? Most apps aren't made for everyone. Even if you look at generic apps, they're not, Instagram's great, but it still has a relatively middle of the market, millennials, Gen Z, bit of the sort of Gen X age ranges using it, and people that are relatively tech savvy and interested in looking at photos. it's not made for everybody. You can't pretend that it is. So while you've been looking at your users, sort of try and create a caricature of who they are. You know, are they 16 to 24-year-olds? Are they 16 to 24-year-olds that are still living at home, that are looking for a bit of extra income, are potentially got a part-time job? Helping put your sort of mindset into who those users are means that it's a lot easier for some of the later steps where we're working out about what they need. So create a persona is the term that it's called in sort of agency lingo. But essentially all that is a caricature version of a real person. So if I use Paul here, you would say he's a businessman, he's time poor because he's always running for meetings, he's really into looking at TED Talks and all these other things. Now, some of those things might not be true, but it creates a caricature of that person that you can then test things against. Normally best to only do a few of those because otherwise you end up falling into the trap of it's for everyone. Because once you've got those personas, you can work out what they need. So you've got those sort of initial objectives and user stories at the beginning where you say, you know, they want to be able to sell clothes on Depop. Okay, but what do they need? Why are they doing that? They're doing it because, like I said, they're a 16 to 24-year-old who's looking for extra money. So the reason they want to sell clothes is to make money. So that gives a bit more purpose for what they're doing on the application. It means that you can break it down into what their problems are. What is the app meant to be bringing to them? So they've got a series of, you know, needs, wants. You know, I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to do that. I need to be able to do this. I need to be able to do that. And that creates a series of problems that hopefully your app's going to overcome. And it lets you work out what the app needs to include. So that leads you nicely onto what functionality you need. So you've worked out, you know, roughly what the app's going to do, roughly what the objective is, roughly who the users are, what the business is going to get out of it. The next step is then to turn that actually into a list of functionality. You know, every app in the world that's got shopping in it needs a login. And if it's got a login, it needs to be able to register. And if it's got a login and registration, you can bet someone's going to forget their password. So it needs a forgotten password link. If it's got that, it needs to have email confirmation. It needs to have all these things. I'm not expecting you guys to get into that like level of granularity as if you were building an application, but it's things to consider that for every one bit of functionality, there's a load of subsidiary connected functionality that comes off the back of that. It needs a login. If it's going to take payment, that means it needs a basket and a checkout process, which means it needs to take payment methods, which means it needs to have order history. And you can see how that creates a series of interconnected functionality points. In that picture there, you can see probably one of the easiest ways to do this is they're creating what's called a niche word of like a paper prototype, but that's a glorified way of saying drawing on a bit of paper with something that looks a bit like an app screen. The best way to sort of work out what the app needs to do, start having a play around. Don't try and create the whole app because you're not at that stage yet, but start working out, well, if it's got this, it's going to need this, and it's going to need this. That will create a list of functionality that you can then audit against. So if you've got a list of functionality points, you can say, okay, I've written out all these 30 things. Does any of these not either go back to the user or go back to the business? If there's something in there that doesn't functionally need to be there and doesn't help the user or business, you've probably added it in for the wrong reason, unless you can justify it. And some of the easier ways to work out those bits of functionality is, unless someone's got an amazing idea, right, for whatever app they're going to come up with, I can bet that someone's done it before in some fashion or another. So they might have not been successful in it. I'm not saying that there's a multi-million-pound business behind the app. There might just be an app that's got a few thousand users that's never been really successful, but it has similarities from what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve. And the other thing as well is look further afield. When we're doing research into apps, if I'm looking at an app that allows you to browse articles, a lot of that can be very similar across lots of different industries. It doesn't really matter if the articles are about fashion, the articles are about agriculture, the articles are about machinery. It's all the same functionality. So when you're looking at other apps that have already got something out there and that have similar functionality points, don't be afraid to go further afield than just the industry, because it's a lot easier to steal / be inspired by something that's already out there. And you can just learn from their, mistakes, what they've done well. You guys would be familiar, pretty much all of you, I'm sure, Instagram, maybe TikTok, every single native app that comes on the phone, all of these things you're super familiar with. A lot of those things in those apps are now in every other app that's in the universe. So those are commonalities that you can use to apply to your own designs. That's great though. I mean, you can steal everything. The problem is you're going to need one thing, at least one thing that's unique. That might be the position of what it is in the market. You know, like you're the only thing that's aimed at a younger audience. You're the only one that does this thing commission free. You're the only one that does this without delivery. There's loads of things that it could be, but that one USP is what distinguishes you from the rest of the market. So that one USP needs to be part of the ecosystem of the app. It can't just be one little thing at the end, because otherwise they'll never notice what that USP was. Your USP needs to be something that sort of lives and breathes in the entire experience of the app. Like there's an example that I'm going to use later on, which is a social media that we created for influencers that make things. So they do like woodworking, they do metalworking, glass blowing, all those things. The USP of that is that all of the functionality around it is based for that. So it's not Instagram. It's not just you put a picture up with some text. This lets you attach the materials you've used. It lets you put the tools you've used in there. It lets you tag brands of those tools and everything else for sponsorship things, and also allows you to put posts in a project. Those things are unique. They don't exist in Instagram. They're something that's for its actual target audience. And while you're looking at what your app and why your app is going to be downloaded, that unique factor is going to be something that needs to be prominent throughout the app. Next, just more of a caveat point rather than anything else, is that like what's really easy is to fall in the trap of trying to design it while you're trying to work out what the functionality is. Don't try and work out what color it is or what your logo looks like and everything else. They're not actually important until you get much further into the experience and validate the idea. A brand comes much later down the sort of the road, and many startups and SMEs and entrepreneurs don't have a logo that ends up having much life to it for a long period of time. You know, if you look at like any of those startups like Instagram and Snapchat, all of those things, they all had a logo, used it for a bit, then they got successful and chucked it out and picked something else that actually made sense for their brand. Airbnb's the same. All of these ones that had a logo that made sense at the time, but once they actually worked out what their brand was, they rebranded anyway. So while you're looking at what it's going to do, very much think form, factor over form. So it's not around the fact of what color it is, what size the buttons are, what pictures are on there, the spinning loaders. None of those things make as much of a core difference, and also won't help sell your idea to someone. You might be able to, you know, confuse them a little bit with some nice glitzy pictures, but when you're doing the presentation and going through it, it's going to be your unique business model, USP, users and research that's going to really put more meat on the bones than just a couple of pictures. The couple of pictures are great for about 10 seconds. And then once they start asking you a few questions, it's going to fall through the cracks. The other one as well, I mentioned on it previously, but it's very easy to design for yourself rather than to design for the end user. You might be one of the target audience for what your app's going to, for your app target, but just because your favorite color is green is not enough reason for the whole app to be green. There's got to be more of a reason, right? There's like, if it's to do with money and everything else, great, green makes sense. If it's, to do with food, you see a lot of reds and oranges, like that's justifiable. If it's pastel colors because it's for a younger audience, great. I like green is not enough, right? It can't just be one resounding that you think that looks better because it looks better. There's got to be always a reason and argument for everything that you're doing. The other one as well is depending on who your users are that you're targeting this at, once you get into the design and you start producing some of the visuals, the wireframes, but even earlier on about your overall idea, talk to people, I mean, if you're really secure about your idea, put them under NDA first if you don't want them to run away and tell other people, but have a chat, work out whether they like that. Do they like this interface or this interface? Do they want this feature or this feature? Does this color work better or this color? With, even with, I've been working at POCAP for like 10 years and worked on maybe like 200, 300 different apps while I've been here. I still get it wrong a hell of a lot by the time it goes out there, because as soon as users start using it, they do something completely different to what you're expecting. And someone will moan about the thing you're doing there, but it's working out what the majority is. You're never going to appease everybody, but working out, your target audience are generally going to want this. Well, you don't know that until you ask them. You can assume things, but actually asking them, talk to the end users, doing some surveys, either qualitative or quantitative. I mean, you can ask a few questions and actually get a real answer. Okay, so I've waffled on like a load there about like how you design an app just by load of words and practice and dropping like agency terms. But in terms of actually designing an app, I tend to break it down into 3 stages. You've got the pre-design, the wireframe, and the design prototype. Paul's probably referred to them more by our 4 stages of development, which is pre-design, design, development, and support. But breaking down into just the design factor, all of that stuff I've spoke about just now is pre-design. You're discovering what the app should do, you're working out your objective, you're listing the functionality, you're doing an audit about whether that's right, you're working out the objectives, you're creating personas, you're doing research, you're doing surveys. All of that's pre-design, because at the end of that, you've basically created a recommendation for yourself of what an app should be like. You know, we need to launch with this, we need this here because everyone else in the market that does that has this, so we need that plus this. That's all the pre-design, and that research creates a great almost brief. So it'd be the sort of thing that I'd love all of our clients to come to us with, so we didn't have to do any of the work ourselves, in terms of this is what we want and this is a justifiable reason for why it does what it does. After that, the sort of design school breaks it down into sort of 2 ways. It's wireframing, which tends to be very much user experience led, and high fidelity, which just means, you know, good looking designs in a prototype format in terms of the interface. So you've got UX, UI, user experience, user interface. The wireframe is a systematic blueprint of everything that's in the app. It doesn't care about color, it doesn't care about wording, it doesn't care about anything like that. It just cares about how many pages are there, what's the flow, this thing's coming from the database, this thing's coming from Twitter. They press pay now, they enter their card details. It captures the core user stories that I mentioned at the beginning and turns them into an actual quantifiable experience around how your user will interact with your app. But you always use the example like blueprints for a house. It doesn't tell you where the sofa is because that doesn't make any difference at this point. It works out where the flow of the house is. How do you go from room to room? How do you get upstairs? Does it make sense that the kitchen's next to the living room? You know, the bathroom shouldn't be on the back of the kitchen because no one wants that unless you're in a really old house, right? So like, it's got to make sense from a sort of logistical flow. And that same thing applies when you're doing the user experience wireframe. And then the last one is a prototype, which most people would, you know, the main focus, but it's how all of that come together to create what it looks like. What color is the button? What size is the font? How big is the button? What's the brand look like? What images? Are they colorful? Are they impactful? Is the design understated like Instagram, where the content is what you look at and you don't look at any of the interface at all? And then that turns into a prototype that we always create into an interactive version where you can sort of tap through, but I'll show that in a minute. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I've got 2 portions to show you on this. So I'm going to show some examples, wireframes and designs that we've done as part of Pocket App, and they're actually using the influencer maker social media that I mentioned earlier. So I'll have a talk through, a little fly through on that, and then I'll show you how that translates from wireframe to design to a prototype. And then after that, I'm going to open up another program, which is called Figma. So the recommendation I'd give you guys, and I'll show you the difference between the 2 when you're doing this. And this, I mean, no one's expecting you to suddenly be able to just design an app, right? Like, it's taken me quite a few years to be any good at doing it to any relative standard. So it's just about getting your ideas down and getting the concept across to whoever you're pitching it there. You know, being able to say, this is roughly what it's going to do and this is roughly what it's going to look like. You're not going to be penalized because your button doesn't look right, because that's what people like me are meant to be doing. What it needs to do is actually capture their experience and capture the idea and the sort of essence of the project. If you're a Mac user, you've actually got the benefit of 2 different things you could use here, because Sketch and InVision, which are the suites that we use here at Pocket App. Sketch is a design program that lets you do the wireframes and the sort of high fidelity interface designs. And InVision is a prototype software, and they have a connection between the 2. Both of them have free trials. Sketch, I think's 10 days, 14 days or something like that, you can download. and then it's like $40 thereafter. But you should be able to get done what you need to. And in all honesty, you can probably just put a different email address in to re-download it again. InVision lets you do one project for free, so you can use that. Figma's, from what I can see and from what it always used to be, you guys should be able to use it basically for educational purposes as you'll need it, pretty much for free anyway. And that will work for anyone because it's a web-based platform. So I'm just going to open up now. Sorry, bear with. Okay, so this is Sketch. So this is a Sketch program, and this is a wireframe. Ignore the mayhem. I had to delete some bits that you guys aren't technically allowed to look at by flicking them off to the corner over there. So as you can see, hopefully someone give me a thumbs up if I'm not asking you to read it, but you can see that fine at the moment, right? Yeah, I can see thumbs. I can see thumbs. I can only see 2 people and they can see it, so that's all I care about. So this is the sort of systematic diagram that I talked about. As you can tell, this isn't what the app's going to look like, because it'd look truly dreadful if it looked like this, right? So what it is a blueprint for what the app will flow like. So in this instance here, I'll just flick you through. That's the name of the project if you cared. The first initial screen, we've got a landing page. We've got the ability to register, log in, password requirements, add in their username, you know, all standard social media stuff. We have like trees. So, you know, if they hit next on here, depending on if they tapped this, they go here. Depending on if they tap this, they go here. It zips through the flow. So you can see what I'm not trying to capture here is layout. Obviously there's a layout here because I need to put something together for it to make sense. Otherwise it wouldn't make sense for when it's sent over, but we're not beholden to that. It's not prescriptive about it. There's no thought gone behind it other than just it's, you know, logical to put it roughly in this way. Things could move completely differently on the screen once it goes through to it. So, you know, we've got a feed page. You can see that if you tap here, it goes over here. It goes to the next page. You don't put stuff like text on here because it's not important. That could say anything. You know, that could, if this is a post of someone doing woodworking, that's going to say, you know, the name of their project. You know, day one, I put the legs on my table or whatever else. It's going to say their username, comments. You can see the feed. You have the ability to sort of drop off of pop-ups and drop-down menus. And broadly, you can see how large an app is, and you can see how many taps it's going to take from here. So like this flow here is a make flow. So this is when they make a new project. We wanted to make this as small as possible, even though there's a lot of stuff to put in. We wanted to make this as small as possible because if I ended up doing, it's a probably autosave and I'll lose all my work. If I ended up having loads of these pages all the way down here, you'd know instantly here, that's a long flow. You know, that means that there's 7 pages someone's got to tap through and it's going to take a long while. So getting it down into a reduced amount, you can see the flows through everything. If anyone uses Photoshop, Illustrator, anything like that, it's all very familiar. You don't need to use all of this stuff that I'm using across here. And you also don't even need to lay it out in the way we do it. We create them as like blueprints like this. Yours could just be a series of screens. You could end up with just a very linear flow for what you're doing. It doesn't need to be all the branches of the forgotten password and the settings and everything else. It could be they click this, they do this, they do this, they do this, they do this, as long as it shows the main story. Now, that prototype, that wireframe, we'd be going back and forth normally if this was a real project and agreeing it as you will do in your teams to work out the rough sort of flow. Then you would start looking at the actual design. So if I translate that into the actual design for this project, so those screens that you saw previously then turn into these screens. They've actually got some design to them. So those landing screens that just said text, text, button, button, text, text, button, button over and over again, then turn into a series of actually created screens. You know, you've got things explaining what the app's about. You can see the feed page. Until I keep my designs really clean. I can't find the feed page. But you can see a browse page here, which is one of the tabs on there. You can see actually putting together some of the design, you know, like what's the color, what's the iconography, what's the branding, where are the buttons, what images are on there, are they square, are they rectangular, all the things that then feel more like think will come naturally to more of you because it's, you know, it's what you're used to seeing. So as soon as you get that layer down of this is what the UX is, this is where the sort of creative part can come in, and this is where you can really put across something unique. And, you know, for when you're putting together the pitch, you don't need to worry about where every bit of data is going to come from. You know, when we do stuff for entrepreneurs and SMEs and startups and stuff like that, we might not have worked out where these tags are going to come from, but you know you need tags in there, so you can use that to visualize it and at least help tell the story. You need to be able to, you know, I caught the end of Paul's pitch about tell them once, tell them again, tell them 3 times, keep telling them until they tell you to shut up, essentially. By being able to show your ideas and formulate it as the actual experience, no one's going to ask you where these come from. No one's going to ask you how do you get verified, as Ruiz would, or however you say that name, Ruse would, how do you get verified? No one's going to ask you that in the pitch, but you know you need the verification status and you know you need the tagging. For this level, that's all you need to get to. Now, what we do with these designs, which I think will probably be the most useful thing for you, is turning this into an interactive prototype. So this can be launched on a phone as well, so you can just open it up and it will go into full screen mode. It'll let you like semi-install it on your phone. It creates an app icon on your phone and everything else. And then you can click through it. And what we do is we turn these into tappable designs. So I can tap through the screens as they were on the previous. It's very much like making a PowerPoint presentation, but it gives a good experience of what this actually app's going to look like. So you can see what each one of the tabs are going to do. You can click on one of the items, you can scroll, you can tap into search, and you can create a fake experience. So it's the sort of thing that you can put in someone's hand and it feels a lot more like it's completed. So you can take that, you can go pop it in a link, put it in the hands of some people, get their feedback, update it, and then use that to explain your idea. So one of the things that we always do when we do these sort of pitch things like you guys are going to be doing is turn that into a prototype and then open this up live here. So I could go, okay, then we're going to have the feed page. Each one of the items on this page will have a picture. Some of them will have video and sound. Users will be able to like it, comment, share, and you can tell the story you're trying to tell with your application. Now, that's using, like I said, Sketch and InVision. Figma, which is a free bit of software, is here. So I did this yesterday, so I haven't done a load of screens on it, but this is pretty good if you guys want to use it, because what you can do is you can make pages relatively easy. So let's say that's my new page here. And there's a series of things that are made for you. So you don't have to be the greatest designer in the world. There's a load of existing buttons, labels, text, everything else that you can just drop in. So you can just go into here, grab drop a button in here, boom, okay. You guys are in my way. There you go. Make it bigger. Not sure what that button's going to do. You can grab forms.
Summons in when you press it.
You can grab forms, make them into text boxes. You can drop labels in. Basically, the building blocks of building an application. So this one I literally put together like yesterday in like 10 minutes, right? You can drop in bits and pieces of here, make it look what you want. And the sort of thing you can see again is I made this screen as a wireframe screen, and then really quickly applied a design layout onto it. So just made a fake app here, and you can see the difference, right? The layout's broadly the same because in all honesty, there's not much to do, but all of this layer is unimportant until you get to the point of doing design. And then you can create prototyping software like this. So I've made the login button go to this screen. I can make the forgot password button go to this screen if I wanted. So then if I press play, login, back, forth. It creates a really quick interactive prototype that you can use to explain your experience. So like I said, you can use combination of Sketch, Envision, Figma. There's also a million other ones out there. If you literally just Google UX prototyping, UI interface tool, mobile design for free, mobile web app, whatever, you'll find a billion out there of the sort of things you can use. So don't feel like you have to use them. The only reason I'm saying that these might be good for you guys to use is they're relatively simple. There's a load of like free stuff available for them. There's loads of help out there, and they are free to use for 7 to 10 days for educational purposes only, I'm sure. Cool. So Paul, that's me done. I don't think I have anything else unless anyone else wants to hear me waffle on for even further about design. I'm probably just open for questions and stuff.
I'll kick off the question. I'm just gonna steal the stage quickly. We do have other questions, so we'll jump onto those afterwards. But in terms of the wireframing, would you recommend that would you at least say that the best apps there then have the least complicated wireframes, if that makes sense? So less is more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I mean you try and wireframe Facebook now, right? And you'd be here for like a year just trying to recreate every single screen that's on there. Naturally, projects get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the more complicated things you're doing, the more complex the wireframe will be. But if you've got a simple, concise idea, that should be able to be achieved in the least number of screens possible. The idea that if you've got more screens, it's better is completely counterproductive when you're talking about an experience. Because if I have to tap 30 things to get to the thing I need to get to, it's just a rubbish experience. There's no mincing words, right? That's completely just a rubbish experience. So, it's not always the case you can just make your wireframe always smaller and smaller and smaller, because that will just mean that like the functionality is missing. But simple is better. Like I said at the beginning with the objective, right? Concise, doing 1 or 2 things really well is a lot better than trying to do a million things kind of rubbishly.
As I said at one of the earlier sessions, if you look at the apps on your phone, they do one thing well, not lots and lots. It's very much a laser focus for an application rather than a Swiss Army knife.
Cool. We've got another question. So Julia is asking, what about using Miro? I assume that's software for building it, as well as Adobe UX Designer. So
yes, Adobe UX is basically exactly the same as Sketch. So it's just Adobe's version of the same. If you guys have already got Adobe licenses, go for it. Adobe UX does the exact same thing that Sketch does. It's got a built-in prototyping tool like Figma does, so you can like select things and turn it into a little prototype at the end. I've only picked these for anyone that isn't familiar with any of those creative suites out there. 100%, whatever you've got, use. There's no reason you couldn't do it using Illustrator and Photoshop and just exporting those images out as JPEGs or image files and then prototyping it up. Miro, I've only used a few times. That's great for showing flows and wireframing and stuff like that. I've never personally used it much outside of just showing user stories because one of our clients uses it.
So one of the things to bear in mind for the competition is use the thing that best showcases what you want to get across. There are no points in it for which tool you use. Bluntly, you could draw it on with pen and paper and stitch it together using a paper prototype software that you can download on your iPhone. If that tells the story right, it's getting your idea and the business concept across that's vital.
Julia, to your point, yeah, there's a million options out there, and it's annoying for me as well because it's like, we just felt we've settled on using Sketch and Envision here just because we've used it for years. In all honesty, for you guys, I'd say if you've never used Sketch and Envision before, don't try and learn them because they're a bit more. Then also you've got to get a load of extra software. If you've never done anything before, I'd use Figma just because it's all in one place and there's a lot of stuff already on it. But if you've already got an Adobe license, feel free to use Adobe XD. That would be my recommendation.
And what's your favorite, Jake? Apparently, that's the question.
Sketch every day. I mean, I actually pressed, like, the reason I was messing up on Figma is because I pressed every shortcut instead of using the buttons on there. And I was making all sorts of weird things happen yesterday. I started trying to print my whole wireframe out while I was doing it yesterday. So yeah, we've used Sketch. It's great. And it was also the first of its kind. Like all of these things, XD come out as Adobe's response to Sketch and all these other things. So Sketch is mine. But Same for the Envision. There's loads of other ones like that. But yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions at all from anyone? So yeah, go ahead, Abel.
I've got a question in regards to the color scheme for the websites and like the text exactly. Like when you design it, what platforms do you use to get the right color balance? Because I know there's a lot in regards to like the complexity of the colors in regards to how people interact with it, like, and you know, being able to be accessible to the wider frame of people in regards to your demographics, in regards to age and sight and vision and such.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for accessibility and stuff like that. So we don't do a lot of branding ourselves here, right? So I don't have to touch on it as much because we're purely a sort of interface and experience sort of design house. But there's a lot of color theory, both from an emotional point of view and from an industry point of view, in terms of it, you know, if you Google like colors associated with brands, you'll see that there's a spectrum of colors that are associated with certain industries. Like I mentioned before, greens and money, obviously, eco, green, gardening, all of that. If you go into foods, you go into like oranges and reds. If you go into like earthy tones and stuff, you get more to do with like, you know, gardening, everything else. It's natural stuff, right, that people associate with certain color things. In terms of accessibility, the only thing I could say is test it. So when you get on these prototyping tools, you can normally put them on a phone. Once it's small, can you read it at a distance with your color, your brightness of your screen turned down? Because what you can't have is like a light gray on a white, because it's not readable, right? And if you do that on top of having a really thin font, there's no way anyone's reading it, right? It might look aesthetically pleasing. You're like, oh, that looks really clean and lovely, but no one can read it. There's a lot of development stuff that happens for accessibility. You know, like there's things that make it that the font increases for people that are impaired of vision. There's voice to text to voice, that way around. But they're built into the operating system. So you don't actually have to design for those. You just got to develop it right. But I'd say for generally, look at others in the market for colors in terms of getting a right steer to be in the right area. And you either on purposely disrupt that and do something different for a reason, or you follow the trend. They're the only real two choices you've got. And then for color, for fonts, everything else, keep it readable. Like just test it, make sure it's right. It's better for it to be clear, concise, readable, impactful than it is just to look kind of a bit neater. Because if someone can't read it, that's a lot more annoying than if, you know, if it doesn't look, make them smile every time they see it turn on. So yeah, font sizes as well, be really careful because it's really easy to make your font really, really small because you're, oh, it's a small phone, so I'll make the font small. Because while you're designing it, you'll have your screen like this big, and unless your phone's like an iPad, right, it's not going to look like that when it goes onto a screen. So make sure you know, even when you're on the screen, you probably even saw me doing it, zooming in and out to make sure that when it's small and roughly the right sort of size, everything's still readable on there. You know, imagine like that wireframe I showed you, the amount I scrolled out. Imagine trying to see that, right? Like just trying to read that and it's just nearly impossible. So yeah, there's lots of theory out there and lots of practice and good methodology, but a lot for you guys is going to be, does it work broadly? And then the rest, you know, we won't penalise your font being a little bit smaller, I'm sure.
If I might just add on to what Jake said, if you are struggling with choosing colors, if you just Google color theory, there's plenty of like really basic guides that can walk you through it. And there's a lot of guides out there. You realize that once you choose a theory to follow, it's almost like choosing colors at random with some of them. So about knowing how to use it. Go ahead and do that. But yeah, just echoing, if you build something and if you like it, I think you're halfway there. If you're going to build it and it looks pretty bad or it looks disgusting, then you know you have to change it, right? Yeah.
I've just popped into the chat actually just a couple of things as well that may help when you guys are doing it that I forgot to mention actually during. There's Dribbble.com and Behance.net. Both of these are design portfolio websites that you can go on and get inspiration for how, you know, basically it's where people like me go on and like post our work that we're working on. So you can see like little shots and snippets of their work. So you can just get some inspiration, you know, put in, you want to do a cool looking slider, like to do money, the cost of something, put in slider on there and you get a load of examples of cool ways of doing it. Now, I'm not going to say just nick it, but like, you know, play around with it, be inspired by it. You know, most things have been done in some way before. And I've also shoved a website in there called Flat UI Colors, which is great for creating color palettes. There's just loads. You can just Google and find loads of color palettes that are on there that have been used on others. Dribbble and Behance both also tell you the color palette for the designs that are in there. So.
Any other questions at all? Anybody? Still open for a few. Might not get a chance like that later on, so ask away now.
That's it. I'm going away after this. That's it.
I was going to say, I've promised to return him to his wife as quickly as possible since he's on holiday. But we've got 10 more minutes. We can steal of his time, so use it wisely.
Again?
I have a question in regards to like, because I have my ideas basically based off like Dribbble and like Behance, because I'm trying to create a digital skills transference platform.
Nice. Yeah.
So those are my like competitors in the sense like, how would I like use inspiration from my competitors in order to not only develop it to make it better, but how can I like use inspiration from them without stealing too many ideas?
Yeah, it's a dangerous area, right? When you're looking at competitors, I think what you'll need to do is look at Dribbble, Behance, and other Skillshare websites and create a list, like a hygiene factor. So it's basically like all of them do all of these things. So they all do this, 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 and this, 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 and this, 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 and this. And that will create a baseline for you to say that for you to be as good as them, you have to have those things. Because if they've all got that, there's no reason they come to you instead, right? Because you're missing some of the functionality, especially if you're trying to get users from those platforms over to yours. So if it's like, a design community or something like that for Dribbble or Behance, that creates a list of features, which isn't stealing at that point, right? Because they're all doing the same thing. If you start comparing lots of different apps or websites or anything else that are all in the same industry or market or functionality, you'll notice that loads of them are just do the exact same thing. Like all of them have 20, 30 things they all do. And then it's the USPs and nuance and like style. I mean, like the reason Dribbble's done so well, right, mainly is because it was a closed off invite only system, but I think it still is now. That meant that there was like a fake, or not really fake, but like a forced or perceived invite only club to it that made people really want to join onto it. And it felt like it was a curated series of users rather than just being anyone could post it anytime. So it brought the quality up. That's a unique thing for Dribbble. So that's the bit you could take from them, but that's where you start veering into the area of stealing rather than, you know what I mean? Like, so it's taking ideas from them, concepts from them, functionality from them, but you do need your like standout piece. In terms of design, realistically, you want to stand away from the competitor. So you don't want to go out, you don't want to look at Dribbble and go, okay, I'm making a Skillshare platform. I'll make it look exactly like Dribbble, but I change the logo and the colors in the corner. Because it's not going to be enough and it's going to be see-through. Being inspired by functionality is fine. Stealing the design doesn't quite work because, it's very transparent.
All right, thank you.
Don't know if that answered. I just talked.
Yeah, that would be cool. Thank you.
I had a question about the development, what language you use for the development of your platforms usually in regards to what do you reckon is the best moving forward, in the sense that you might potentially move to have a different developer, and what language is the most transferable, because like HTML and PHP is predominantly used, but then again, some developers like to use other languages. And which would you predominantly stay clear from if you had a developer who's like, okay, I'm going to build it, but only in this language, and which would you say is more of a safe zone moving forward?
It's difficult, right? It's a moving target, that one, with the development, because we've tried frameworks in the past, even here, that started off really popular. There was one called Xamarin that we won't pretend didn't exist, and it was owned by Microsoft, and it was a competitor to React Native. I'm just going to talk, everyone can just nod and smile if they have no idea what I'm talking about. But like there was a React Native, and that's made by Facebook. They were both very even. Xamarin's dead now. It's a completely dead language, and no one really uses it at all. It's been discontinued for support. No one knew that 3 years ago. Someone could have guessed, but there's no way of knowing that. I think, depending on what you're talking about, for websites, HTML and PHP aren't going anywhere, right? They've been around for absolutely years, and they're like a staple of, WordPress sites that basically like 80% of all the websites still out there are PHP based. There's loads of frameworks out there, JavaScript frameworks, there's all these sort of things. We use cross-platform solutions for mobile development, so React Native. I think as long as there's community around there, and as long as there's buying, look at who's using them, really. So like, there's no way of saying like, oh, I'd steer clear of this developer because he's doing it in X language. because that X language might be really beneficial to that one technology. It's something that we say a lot at POCAP, is being agnostic about what it's developed in is beneficial, because it means that you work out what it needs to do, then go, okay, to do that, the best development language is this. So use that, rather than going, I'm going to build it in this for no reason at all other than you just like this or you like the logo or whatever else. Working out what it does and then working out what to build it in is the smarter way of doing it. That's not always possible, right? Because if you're a startup, you might only have a React Native guy, so you have to build it like that. But yeah, there's nothing like you have to stay clear of it. There's some dead technologies, but one Google, if you went out there and put that technology in, it would say no one uses it anymore, and that'd be the end of the story, right? So.
We've got a question from Krishna. I did mute you because we had some background noise. If you would like to mute yourself now, please ask away.
Yeah, thank you, Christian and Jake. My TG is diabetes, people with diabetes, and the core functionality, the one thing the app really should do and the business is to demystify the nutritional labels on packaged foods. So in terms of pitching the idea for the competition or fleshing out the wireframe, should I be focusing on that particular core functionality and get as granular as possible with just a snapshot of the supporting functionalities like testing and payments and community, etc.?
Yeah, it's a good question, especially when you're going to have a limited time for the pitch, right? Paul, how long's the pitch that they're doing?
5 minutes.
Yeah, just do that bit. Don't do the rest of it. Yeah, so like the thing is don't worry about like, I showed wireframes that were the whole thing as if you're going to build it. I've shown things that are going to be built as opposed to showing things that are going to be pitched for investment. So work out your USP, work out the things that make a difference. They're the ones that you need to show, right? If the payment's going to be taken via a card, everyone in the world knows how that happens, right? You put a card number in, you press pay, you put your billing address in, it's done. There's no point showing that. What you need to show is like, the scanning of a package to show what the information is on it, like the breakdown of the iconography that are on the back of the medicine, all that sort of stuff, right? Like that's your important USP, and that's the thing you need to somehow get across in 5 minutes. Well, that is short.
Also, try and make sure you answer the obvious questions. So, where's the data coming from? We talked about this in an earlier one. If you're reliant on a third-party data source, does it exist? Will it be built? Will it be crowdfund sourced? How is that going to work? Because if you aren't, they're the questions that an investor would have. Well, that all sounds really exciting, but so you probably know what the buts are, but let's get them in there and get them answered.
Sure. Thank you, Paul and Jake. Thank you.
No worries, mate.
Yep, so we've got yet another question from Medina, and she's asking essentially, or saying rather, because there's quite a bit of it, if there's a search tool feature within the app, meaning a big database involved, naturally, should it be included in a prototype so that the user can get the exact search result, or could it be a feature essentially shown as a standalone thing that retrieves a random result and isn't a complete functionality, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so like the prototyping software that I'm talking about doesn't interact with any data at all, right? It's just faked information. So I'd say for trying to explain your breadth of data and searching, you're probably better off showing that in maybe one snapshot with a load of results and explaining that to the side about the breadth of your data and about the feature itself, rather than trying to show that in a flow at all. Because in a flow, you're going to try and tell a story. So what you could do is go, okay, then my user would go on and they'd search for X. It will then search the database, explain about how big your database, what it's going to include. It's going to pull in from different third parties, whatever else, and then go, if they search this, this is the sort of results they get. So you have a fake result. It's not really going to use any data at all, but it's going to give the essence of what your product will be. You can't really interact with any data in these things unless you're going to start building something, which aspirationally go for it, but you'd actually have to start coding and building something that was going to interact with a real database. And I think for a time period of time, that could be quite an extensive bit of work. So it's about faking and showing it as much as possible, and then using your words to fill in the blanks. The designs can't do anything, right? Like they say 1,000 words, right? But you could do 2,000 while the picture's up there. So like try and get as much out of the design as possible, but really you're going to have to explain stuff that's going on behind the scenes. Like those wireframes that I showed, I've got loads of little boxes everywhere that's like, this talks to a database, this does this, this does this, this does this. You can't pick that up from the picture. So some of those bits will need to be explained rather than visualized.
Also, if I might just add on to that, as impressive as it would be for each one of you to complete coding of your applications and have them already on the market, you know, with millions of users ready for the competition, as impressive as that would be, that's not what we're looking for.
If they manage to do that, they don't need to win the little prize at the end. I mean, I mean, that's where the what Jay's talking about is what you're doing at this stage is selling the idea of the fact that you can build this and it would probably need investment. And so this is like a mini round of investment. And when you're going to pitch, you know, in the next round, so let's say you win and you've still got this problem with the database, actually building that database and managing it is a complicated task. And that's what you're going to be asking some of the money towards when you fundraise, because you're not going to be able to crack all of that at this stage. But what you're trying to do is show in each step, you're just showing a little proof of process that you're asking them to invest in. You know, once you start building it, it's starting bringing on customers. Once you're bringing on a few customers, can you get the cost of acquisition down to a sensible number? If you can get it down to a sensible number, can you show real growth? And at each of those points of inflection, you're probably looking for additional funding. But that's the step that you're taking investors through to back your idea as you go forward.
Any other questions at all from anybody? We're still open. We'll give you a few seconds.
Well, I'm going to say thank you, Jake, for coming along, and thank you, Mrs. Jake, for letting him, because it's actually half term and he's supposed to be enjoying himself and going out for lovely walks, because that's all you can do these days.
So this is my wedding anniversary. This is what I'm doing. I'm hanging out with you guys. I mean, it's more fun than the other room, to be honest. You can hear me, so it's fine. But yeah, no problems, guys. Like I said, just focus in, like Paul said, onto that bit. Use the techniques I've talked about, but don't try and do the whole app, right? Like that, look, those things I'm showing, I've got 50, 60, 70 screens in. Just find your thing that you want to show, the 10 screens, 5 screens, 6 screens, whatever it is, like Krishna had for his bit. Focus on that, get that looking amazing, and show that in the pitch rather than, cheers, Krishna, rather than trying to do the whole thing, right? No one cares about the forgotten password screen. I don't even care about the forgotten password screen. I have to build the thing. So like, don't talk about that one. Talk about what makes your app, your product, your business special. Cool.
Great. Thank you very much, Jake. You can drop.
No worries. Enjoy, guys. Cheers, Paul. I'll talk to you later.
Cool. I actually have a question for Paul. Just last question on
Yeah,
that.
sure. Any questions about the general, either the general competition approach or anything else that we've covered off? I've got a couple more slides I could go through at the end, but I equally can share those afterwards if you've got plenty of questions.
Paul, so question from me, I'm sure everyone will be interested in this as well, considering everyone here is trying to develop an app. Do you have any tips for, let's say you have your minimum viable product, you have that first iteration of the application. Do you have any tips for essentially getting it out there? Good.
So, unfortunately, it's got much harder these days to launch a product. Back in the early days of the app world, basically you built an app, you stuck it on the App Store, and people would discover it. Bluntly, if you stick an app on the App Store, they are more likely to discover a pin in a haystack than find your app, because there are literally billions of apps out there. You do need to be very focused about your now there's some things you can do, and talked about them previously, but one is putting social sharing hooks within the process so that I am actually sharing the product. I'm incentivized to do that for whatever reason, whether that's because it's fun, whether that's because I'm rewarded, whether it's because it's the only way the app works, because actually it's a social interaction app. You know, the way I discovered WhatsApp many years ago was someone said to me, "Oh, want to get in touch. Should we use WhatsApp?" And I was like, "Well, what's that?" And you know, and then I was introduced to it. So work at what are the levers that you can put in that will help with that sharing. Clearly, marketing, paid marketing is crucial for the launch of most apps. You can do through Facebook and Twitter what are called install campaigns. So you spend money and they will drive people to your app to install it. And then the price that you pay for that depends on the number of people that go on to successfully do that. The other is, good old-fashioned marketing. So an app in London launched a couple of years ago near where our office used to be, and it was a food offers app. So it was offers at cafes, street stalls in the market, etc. And what they did was good old-fashioned leafleting. And they gave out leaflets and to people coming out of the tube who worked in the area who were likely to want to be going for something for lunch, and gave an offer which was, get £5 off when you spend £10 to get people to download and try the app. Your first barrier is getting them to download and try it. Your second is to getting them to keep using it. But in your business plan, put in cost of marketing. And we would typically just to an average company say, whatever the cost of your build is, you're going to need to spend the same again on marketing, because it's not just going to fly off the shelves. Now, that said, if you've got a niche market, there's a particular reason why you think that's not the case, then justify it. Another one is keep to a tight geographical area for your initial marketing, particularly anything that requires people to interact, etc. There's no point having a dating app where there's nobody in the dating app from around where you are. It sort of defeats the object, ultimately, even in these COVID times, ultimately, you're going to want to meet the person. So less important if it's a online chat product, in which case you need to be more targeted maybe about the niche. But Deliveroo launched and built its whole business in Southwest London. And they didn't move out of Southwest London for a long time. They got a lot of investment and refined their processes just in Southwest London, because they were focused on, right, how do we make this ecosystem work? How do we make it work for the restaurants? How do we make it work for the delivery drivers? How do we make it work for the customer? If you'd expanded it quicker, they probably wouldn't have got all of those things so right, because they'd have been focused on the growth, not on getting everything right. Once they got it right, they then focused on growth.
Cool. Any other questions at all? If we have no other questions, I'm gonna reiterate the competition, what's going on with that, and then we can draw to a close.
I've got a question. In regards to pitching technique, we're watching a lot of pitching. What would you recommend as the best format to you? Because usually they come out with a general light anecdote about the scenario, or like a deep metaphorical thing of what's going on, and then they delve deeper into what it is.
It's got to be what your style is, yeah. And also think about how you're going to pitch. It's going to be over Zoom, and you're not going to be in a room. So my style is, and I find it really difficult, is I like to walk around. Christian, remember when I came in last year, and he could never get me on the bloody camera because I'm constantly wandering around and wandering off shot. But that's how I like to talk. Think about how are you going to share the deck? How are you going to share on screen? Does it work? Practice. And I'm not picking on you, but you've got a bright light behind you. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
That's not perfect. Try to make sure that your camera, you're looking more straight in, so you're looking at the person. Clearly you're not looking at the person, but you are. Sometimes actually the person can be over here on the other screen because you want the. So when I present my deck, I put the deck I want to present on here on my small screen. Because then I'm talking to them. I then can't see you guys because you're over here on a different screen, but I'm talking to you because I'm looking at the camera. Think about things like even simple things. Can you move a lamp around so it's lighting you from the front rather than from the back? All of those little things make your presentation less distracted, so they then can focus on the content. But get your story across reasonably quickly. Yes, if you can work, if it's to your style, be humorous, but if it's not your style, then don't try and be something you're not, because that won't come across as authentic. Investors are investing as much in the person as the idea.
Yeah. And don't make it overly complicated. I think that there's loads of little tips for the way that you record yourself and the way that you can do this. And I advise everyone here, record yourselves on Zoom, and when you pitch, do it. It helps a lot. But yeah, don't overcomplicate it. Assume that whatever idea you're presenting to whoever you're presenting it to, assume that they know nothing. So they don't know about your idea, they don't know about anything. And you have to explain it in a very simple way, and you have to explain it in a very quick way. Just assume those two things. And on a second note, yeah, just make sure everything is like nice. Maybe I'm a bit guilty of bright lights behind me, but I've got plenty of light coming in at the front, so I guess it's not too terrible. But another thing, I've watched a lot of pictures recently, and some of them are interesting to say the least. Like we had someone like, like camera coming out in from underneath them.
Yeah, we don't want to see, we
Yeah.
don't want to see the hairs up your nose.
Yeah, you can see up their nose or something, or like they're really close. Like nothing wrong with being too close to the camera, but if you're almost too close and that square is just your face as well, you don't look like a person presenting. You look like a snapshot from a Gazette of a local criminal or something. That's why they always cut out the background. That's what people look like. So include some context, make the lighting really, like even on your face. If you can have some lighting from the front, that's always much better. And again, keep it simple and assume that whoever is watching knows absolutely nothing. These are like the winning tips I would give.
I think Krishna is asking if he can cheat and pre-record it all. No, I think we're looking for a live pitch.
Yeah, we're going for the live stuff.
Can we do the thing?
Otherwise, to be honest, if Krishna, if you did record it, it just wouldn't feel natural because you wouldn't interact with the audience. Because even though I'm saying, I'm not necessarily able to see you all the time, the few people that are on camera, it really helps me as a presenter to see their reactions. So the judges will be on camera and they'll be either nodding or looking quizzical. If they're looking quizzical, ask them, oh, did that not make sense? Don't be afraid to interact with the judges and draw them in.
Yeah. Just looking at questions.
I was wondering, should we do the thing where like there's half a slide, half the image is taken up of the actual presentation or your wireframe?
If you can deliver that technically, fantastic. But don't. You've got 5 minutes. The idea. I mean, I was talking about how you're going to look, etc. They're all little things. You just don't want them to be a distraction. Well, a worse distraction would be as if you technically find it difficult to do whatever it is. Better to pop it up. Do a few slides, talk to those as you're doing it, take them away and close with a person-to-person close. But, think about what you're going to open with, think about that content, think about what you're going to close on. You've probably heard the term elevator pitch.
Yeah.
So an elevator pitch is literally, if you got in an elevator with an investor, between floors 1 and 15, can you pitch your idea? Because that may happen one day, that opportunity walks in and you need to be able to explain it like that and get it across so straightforwardly. So, write it down and maybe the idea is 200 words. Try and get it down to 2 sentences. What fundamentally is your idea?
Very good anecdote. Yeah, the CEO needs to invest in your idea, not call the security. Remember that one.
Yeah, be friendly, not scary.
So yeah, they'll rough you up on the way out. So, yeah, any other questions at all? Otherwise, we'll.
If not, I will send the slides to Christian to circulate to everybody. I'm not sure we actually circulated the slides from last week, so I'll send both decks. And make sure you've got those. And then I look forward to seeing as many as possible of you in the pitch final.
Yeah, awesome. As to the slides and the other content, so whether you are aware of it or not, all of the free sessions, the recordings from them are already available to you right now. This recording in particular will be available on Monday-ish. I hope so. I'm the one editing them. If you need any other help, if you're looking for any other resources related to this series, just email us at obviously startups@Essex, yada, yada, yada. In terms of the competition, just to clarify, there are actually 2 awards and 2 potential winners. The prize itself consists of a prize of £7,500, and not all cash prize. So I saw your ears prick up, but that's not quite the case. The way that splits is £4,500 of that will go towards you as support from Paul and his company with the development of the actual application. So you'll get help from Paul over here. And the remaining £3,000 that will go to you as a grant. So that is the money that then you can utilize in various ways. We do, again, hope to send the invitation by early, well, next week, early next week. By then you should have received your invitation. And we will be doing the actual pitching events on the 11th. So I believe that covers it. Oh, again, if you have any questions, just pop us an email at Essex Startups. But yes, if there are no more questions, thank you all for coming. And yeah, I'll look forward to seeing all of you pitch. Yeah, thank you.
Cheers all.
Awesome. In a bit, guys.